On one hand, I feel relieved, obviously, to be out of a war zone safe and sound. I'm incredibly lucky. And on another hand, I feel extremely guilty and like I'm missing my coworkers and friends that I left in Palestine. There's a huge need for not only aid workers, but any healthcare staff in general in Gaza right now. And because the humanitarian organizations are keeping the missions a bit short because they're very intense, they have a lot of turnover of staff. And so I knew they needed people, and I decided that it was good to go. To be honest, I think in any humanitarian work, the biggest part of what we do is bearing witness and living with the people that are there, going through whatever the event is and suffering. I think just being there with them and saying that I see you and I'm here with you, and the world is with you, I think is bigger than anything I could bring medically or clinically. I was working at Nasser Medical Complex, and so I worked primarily with inpatient pediatrics, NICU, PICU, and pediatric emergency. At times extremely heart-wrenching, but you saw a lot of resilience for sure. I was really struck, of course, by the amount of resilience that the patients and the families had, as well as the Palestinian staff that I got to work with. Of course, it is extremely hard to see children suffering and dying in a context where they shouldn't have to. There were a lot of infectious diseases and skin diseases because of the hygiene conditions that were a result of the people being displaced. Of course, all the people of Gaza, most of the people of Gaza are displaced from the north to the south and are living in encampments, so tents on the sand. And so infectious diseases and skin diseases run rampant. Even if you, like as hard as you can possibly try to maintain hygiene conditions, it's nearly impossible because even in the market, it's extremely hard to find hygiene supplies like soap and shampoo. I remember speaking with a pediatrician I was working with, and his own children, he was having trouble preventing them from getting skin diseases because of the lack of supplies in the market. So we saw a lot of infectious diseases like that and respiratory illnesses where the burden of care was higher because of the war conditions. And we also saw a lot of malnutrition. Almost all of the buildings are destroyed, or at least partially destroyed. The hospital I was working in had been evacuated and had been invaded by the IDF prior to our work there. And after the ground invasion had finished and they had left, the IDF had left, the staff could come back and restart care at the hospital. And so they did a lot of rehabilitation work on the hospital, including Doctors Without Borders helped rehabilitate the hospital. It didn't feel like a normal hospital, but on the day-to-day, there was still a lot of laughter, actually, and positivity. And I learned a lot about how to maintain that kind of attitude in the worst of circumstances. There was bombs around all the time, very close. You definitely wonder at times, but I was more fearful for the Palestinian staff that I was working with, to be honest. In theory, MSF, Doctors Without Borders, is a deconflicted NGO, and so all of our structures are deconflicted, meaning that they're supposed to not be bombed, but the encampments where the staff that I was working with live are not deconflicted. And so they were at a much greater risk than I was. And so I was worried for their safety much more than my own, but I'd love to go back, certainly.